A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Sean Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
All right, everyone, welcome into One Giant Step. Bryce Gelman here. Today, we're going to be discussing the three biggest question marks for the Giants going into draft season. Now that free agency is basically over, there are a few guys still out there that the Giants may sign. They could sign. They don't really have much cap room left. We'll get to those guys. Also, going to be discussing one major trade that the Giants could make. Whether you agree, disagree, stay tuned for that. But the Giants, listen, all things considered, they addressed their two biggest needs during free agency. They addressed their defensive line and they addressed their offensive line, the two major components you need to be successful in the NFL. So they started this foundation that we discussed last week here on One Giant Step that is going to allow them to be successful down the road. But there are three places that the Giants need major improvements. We're going to start with the secondary. And this is in order of most important to least important. So I think the secondary is the most important area that the Giants are going to need to improve. And it's not necessarily going to be possible this year. Could be a next year situation when more cap comes off the books with Daniel Jones not looking like they'll re-sign him. We'll get into that. Or they're not going to guarantee that second half of the deal. We'll get into that. But starting with the secondary, cornerbacks specifically here. Because the Giants' top three cornerbacks are Deonte Banks, Trey Hawkins, Cordell Flott. This is just, think about that. Think about that right now. All three of these guys are younger than me. Actually, Trey Hawkins is older. But all of these guys are younger than 23, 24 years old. These two, specifically Trey Hawkins, who was benched, if you remember, was benched going into the Seattle game for Cordell Flott. All three of these guys are the Giants' top three cornerbacks. And they have barely any experience. And you're going to be trusting three guys with 1 to 2 years of experience, especially in the NFC East. All of the great wide receivers in the NFC East, 6 games you're playing. 2 against CeeDee Lamb, 2 against Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, 2 against Terry McLaurin. This is going to be a major issue, and it's unfortunate now that the Giants are in the spot that they are, paying Daniel Jones $40 million, and also not being in a position to win, because this is severely limiting what they're able to do, specifically with these secondary roles that they need to fill. So it's just going to be tough to trust, the 2 second-year cornerbacks in Deonte Banks and Trey Hawkins, especially after losing Xavier McKinney. Like that is going to be a catastrophic loss for these guys. I understand it's a different position that they're playing. And the Giants, they signed Jalen Mills as their McKinney replacement. But in reality, this just isn't going to cut it. And going forward with the personnel that they have, with the targets that they have, and specifically, I'm mentioning some of the latest mock drafts to come out. It looks like the Giants are going to dedicate their top draft assets to drafting offensive guys, to drafting a receiver, to drafting a third quarterback in their quarterback room, to drafting a running back behind Devin Singletary. I think, again, and this is why I'm putting them first, because the secondary, I think, is their most pressing need. But with with the capital they have in the draft, the Giants see fit as they are going to need to go out and sign offensive players, because they are severely lacking skill players in their offense. But they're going to have to at least address a 4th, 5th, and maybe a 6th round pick towards some flyers later on in the draft. And they can sign a veterans minimum or 2 player. Either way, you don't have a good secondary. The front 7 is incredible. One of the top in the league, probably a top 5 front 7 in the league. Their defensive line is going to be a problem for opposing teams. But who do you have in your secondary? You lost your number 1 guy, especially now in Shane Bowen's defense, which relies heavily on safeties. Who do you have? Who do you have? You are going to need to see a major step up from Deonte Banks and Trey Hawkins. As I mentioned before, Trey Hawkins was benched going into the Seattle game and then played sparingly over the rest of the year. Cordell Flott got more play than him. There are so many other teams now with better secondaries and better receivers. And that leads me perfectly into the second topic here, which is number 2, the receiver. Because now the Giants have established a solid slot in Wan'Dale Robinson. They have established a solid deep threat, one of the fastest guys in the league, in Jalen Hyatt. They've devoted some high draft picks to receiver. They are going to devote an even higher draft pick to receiver now, because with the 6th overall pick in the draft, right now, with all these mock drafts that are coming out, it looks like I wouldn't say it's 50-50. I still think the Giants are going to go receiver. I mean, let's hope. We'll get into who else they could potentially draft at 6, but it looks like they're going to draft a receiver, which means that they're looking at Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors. Maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. falls to them. I don't see that happening. And this will be an extremely contentious debate over the next 5 weeks until the draft. Do they go quarterback at 6? Do they trade down to another team to allow them to draft J.J. McCarthy? Maybe they just select McCarthy themselves. But right now, the Giants desperately need a number 1 receiver. And with this draft, with the guys at the top, with the position that they have in the draft, it looks like they'll go receiver. And hopefully one of these guys will pan out. Whoever the Giants draft will pan out and be that number 1 receiver they so desperately need. Because once you get that number 1 receiver, you are going to see major improvement for Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt. 2 guys who have shown incredible promise and have shown flashes of brilliance, let's just say. I mean, as a deep threat, Jalen Hyatt could be one of those top guys in the league. One guy you have to watch out for, but you need to establish a number 1 receiver for your quarterback to go to every time. And getting a receiver that is reliable, like the number 1 receivers in the league, like a Justin Jefferson, like a Jamar Chase, are reliable, changes everything. It opens everything up. It's like actually getting good offensive linemen changes your offense. Getting a good receiver changes everything as well, especially for your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th receivers. There are 3 guys in this draft at the top. The Giants, one of them, maybe 2 of them could potentially fall, and they'll have their pick at the better or of the 2. Marvin Harrison Jr. looking like they're not going to get him. Maybe somehow he falls. I don't see that happening, especially with the Chargers, a pick before them, trading away Keenan Allen. They're going to go receiver. The Giants will end up with the lesser of the 2, or the lesser of the 3, the middle, or the lesser of the 2 of Odunze and Malik Neighbors. They will draft one of those guys. Hopefully one of those guys pans out and they change everything they're doing on offense because they have that reliable guy as a receiver. There is one guy out there who 3 days ago tweeted, you may have seen it, and I quote, "Ready for whatever." And that player is Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is 30 years old, turning 31 in November of next year, or November of this year, during this next upcoming season. He had a down year with only 1,183 yards. Only. I mean, when was the last time a Giant receiver had those numbers? Odell probably. But this is his lowest since 2019, when he played 15 games, and he played 17 this past year. So now, do I think that this could work financially? I don't know. I'm no cap expert. I know the Giants don't really have that much cap room left. I know that Stefon Diggs makes $18 million a year. I don't know how they'd work that out. But what I do know is if they're able to, they're going to be able to acquire Stefon Diggs for a middle rounder, maybe a 4th. I could say, I would think maybe a 5th or a 6th. If you look at what Keenan Allen just went for. And Keenan Allen was arguably better than Stefon Diggs this past year. And keeping Stefon Diggs on the Bills, especially with how, I mean, listen, and now you lose Gabe Davis. Like, they need Stefon Diggs. But what they have done with him, what they have turned him into, he's no longer a deep threat. He's not averaging 15, 16 yards per catch. When he was traded to Buffalo, his yards per catch went down drastically. And that has gotten progressively worse each year. They don't look downfield to him. He runs strictly curl routes. Like on Madden, you go curls. He's running curls the entire game. It's beyond me. It's beyond a lot of people who watch football, who specifically some people on my timeline who are Bills fans, that it doesn't make sense. The Bills are holding on to a guy who's 30 years old, turning 31, who they don't use in the right fashion. Do I see another team, swooping in and trading for Diggs before the Giants do? Probably. As I mentioned before, the Giants are not in a position to really compete. Stephon Diggs, also as a 30-year-old, probably isn't going to want to come to the Giants in a potential rebuild year. But the Giants wanted to make that move. You get your number one receiver, and it opens up what you're able to do at 6, specifically drafting a quarterback. So, do you want to trade for Stephon Diggs? And let me know down in the comments below. Personally, if the return is a 6th rounder or 7th rounder, the Giants are able to make it work financially, why not? Why not? I think all of us are still stuck feeling how good it felt in 2022 to win a playoff game, to have hope, to really believe that your football team can actually make the playoffs again. And how it was going this time last year where the Giants, everything was looking up, paid their quarterback. Everyone thought that Daniel Jones could potentially be the franchise quarterback. Look where we are right now. Trading for Diggs will allow this team to compete. Again, their secondary is going to be a major issue. They are going to get lit up by opposing offenses, especially if they don't go out and they sign, one of these remaining guys left, and specifically Stephon Gilmore is still out there. The Giants could make this deal. If they do, again, it will help them compete going forward. All right, let's move into the last one. And what a surprise. Quarterback. Right now, the Giants have 2 potential starting quarterbacks going into this year. They traded just last week for Drew Lock, or they signed Drew Lock, the $5 million deal for 1 year. It was reported by the Seahawks GM that they wanted to keep him, the Seahawks did, but he was sold on the prospect of competing for the starting quarterback role with Daniel Jones. Not a good look. Especially with every report that came out from the combine, specifically what Rich Eisen had to say about Daniel Jones' time being the Giants quarterback coming to an end. But then Locke comes out and does some damage control. I'm sure the Giants PR team had him say this, but he basically said that Jones is the starter and that he's not looking to take his role. What the heck is going on with the Giants quarterback group? Joe Schoen and Brian Dable are grasping at straws right here. They really want something to stick. And right now, it does not look like it is going to. They are probably going to draft a quarterback in the NFL draft. You're going to have 3 quarterbacks potentially vying for that starting role. I don't understand how Drew Lock saw this situation and was like, all right, I have a better chance playing here than Seattle. I don't know how that's possible. I don't. Because the Giants draft a quarterback, I'd say that he probably had a better chance to start over Geno Smith than to start over Daniel Jones. I mean, we'll see. We'll see about Daniel Jones. But to start over a rookie quarterback who's going to be tied to the Giants for the next 4 or 5 years, and not a quarterback who's only under contract like Daniel Jones and Drew Lock for the next year. I don't get it. I don't understand paying $5 million for a backup quarterback, specifically when the GM who last had him, who was trying to sign him, said that Drew Lock left because he was promised the opportunity to compete for the starting role, but then you got to do damage control, and you got to say, no, it's going to be Daniel Jones. The Giants have no idea. That's the reality that we live in. Daniel Jones is coming off a torn ACL. They have no idea what he is going to be. There is one positive in all this. The Giants are going to have a good offensive line. The excuses are over for Daniel Jones. Maybe that's what they sold Drew Lock on. Listen, we're going to give him a shot, but if he comes out and falls flat on his face again, you're going to play. Maybe that's what it was. Drew Lock, who knows, could turn into a stud quarterback under Brian Dable. We will see. Daniel Jones was a very solid, serviceable quarterback in 2022. That's why he got his money. It has been reported, and this is the other piece of news that I wanted to cover here with the quarterback. It has been reported that the Giants the other day wined and dined J.J. McCarthy. It makes this whole situation just even that much more confusing. We all know the Giants are probably going to take a quarterback. Will they take one at 6? This needs to be another topic for another day. We will cover this extensively going into the draft season. Sean will be back in a couple of weeks. We're going to discuss this. I'm not going to try to get too much into it because I'm going to flip out. Personally, I'll say this right now. That's the one thing I'll say. The Giants draft J.J. McCarthy. I will not be watching a Giants game this upcoming year. At number 6, if they draft J.J. McCarthy, this is Daniel Jones 2.0. They can't afford to fail again with a quarterback. I know that was Gelman, but this regime, how much could they possibly believe in J.J. McCarthy? I know that the fans out there believe in McCarthy less than these GMs do, that there's been a renewed interest, or not even renewed, just new interest in J.J. McCarthy, specifically from teams like the Vikings, like the Broncos, who may try to trade up to 4 to 5 to get J.J. McCarthy. If that happens, awesome. That is awesome. That is so great for the Giants that they don't have to make that mistake of drafting J.J. McCarthy. If he turns out to be a stud, fine. But if the Giants draft him and he turns out to be a bust, that's it for Dable. That's it for Joe Schoen. That's it for all of us Giants fans who actually had some hope for this front office, who had some hope for this organization after what has been a brutal stretch over these last 7 to 8 years. We will see about that. We will see about J.J. McCarthy. Fingers crossed that they don't end up drafting him. All right, that'll do it for today's One Giant Step. I'm Bryce Gelman. Sean Morash will be joining us in the near future. I'm holding down the fort until then. But until next week, thank you all for taking one giant step with me. I'll see you then.